Welcome to the Find the Way podcast. In this show, we will try to explore what is happening in emerging markets and how entrepreneurs, investors, and communities are simply finding the way to make phenomenal things happen, regardless how volatile the environment may sometimes seem. That's going to be fine. But hey, I think that we can start little by little getting into today's topic, where we're talking about logistics and supply chain overall in emerging markets. I think that we have a good combo. Radu, you are from Romania, from an emerging economy. You have been traveling all around the world, now based in Asia. One of the most influential people within the world of supply chain and logistics. For those who do not know Radu, he has been all over the place for a long time, but it's a little bit different background. He had no idea how he ended up really in logistics and supply chain. We can get into that story maybe a little bit later. Um, and on the other hand, Agus, I think that based on your LinkedIn profile, you're every mother's and father's dream child. That you really went through the whole thing. You went into the MIT of Latin America school called ITBA. From there, you actually did your MBA in Harvard. You went through how many years at BCG? Goodness, how did you survive?
I was 17 years in BCG. It's more like 15 if you take out the two that I was at the MBA. But it was 17 years from start to end, and I was a managing director and partner for the last 6 years. Did something very
Look at
different
that.
from logistics and supply chain, though.
Yeah.
I was focused a lot in industrial goods. I run the global practice for the mining industry. That's how I ended up in Chile. I ran the global practice for the mining industry for 3 years, um, and so it was quite a trip. But then um, a good friend of mine, actually the current executive VP of commerce in Mercado Libre, whom I had worked with in BCG as well, Ariel Sharfstein, approached me and said, "Hey, I have a crazy idea that I think you'd be great in this role," and invited me to join Mercado Libre. And that was like 2 years ago. I first started. I started as a senior VP, running everything but the operations of Mercado Libre's Mercado Envíos, which is the whole logistics and supply chain business in Mercado Libre. And then starting February this year, I became head of Mercado Envíos. So right now, run the
You
whole
seem happy
business.
with the decision.
No. It was really a good decision. I had a fantastic time at BCG. I learned a lot. Actually, here at Mercado Libre, we have plenty of BCGers, both in my team and in the rest of the teams. It's a great. It's almost like a second business school in several ways. But I had a fantastic time. But now I wanted to be running a business, um, beyond giving advice or consulting to other businesses, and just put my money where my mouth is, and that's why I did the jump.
Look at that. And then on the other hand, Radu, I briefly mentioned, you can also give a little intro on your own words. You are like one of those super influencers of logistics and supply chain, have been growing a phenomenal audience basically from scratch. A young kid who found himself in Singapore, was searching his way in multiple different ways, and then ended up in logistics. Can you share a little bit on how and why logistics supply chain overall? For Radu.
It's just to make sure, I wasn't a kid though. I had just graduated university. Just to I wish I was that young, but so, but yeah, in some ways, so I did a little bit of management consulting myself, but not with the prestigious firm like BCG. So it was a smaller local Asian setup. I ended up in Asia also by mistake. So I'm Eastern European by birth. Then I ended up in Asia, not by mistake per se, but by the audacity that I had at the end of graduating my university to think that, hey, why not go to Asia and learn management consulting and, consult Asian businesses? Why not, right? I mean, when you're 23, 24 and with the inflated self-esteem and completely unrealistic self-esteem, it sounded like a good idea. Somehow I did find an opportunity. Of course, I learned that there's a lot of things that I don't know, and it took me many, many years to get to know Asia truly. But fast forward after a couple of roles within management consulting, sales related type of positions, then about 10 years ago, I stumbled across a company that opened up an executive search recruitment arm in Asia. And my first client was in logistics, and from then onwards, the last 10 years or so, we kept digging. We ended up because there's recruitment in itself is not necessarily rocket science. Most things on this planet actually are not rocket science if you distill it down to the fundamentals of it. Management consulting ultimately is a lot about listening to people, paying attention to things, and then giving some advice on sometimes which can be obvious. It's like, my wife tells me a lot of good things, but sometimes I don't listen to her, and I listen to somebody that I pay $2,000 to go to a training. A little bit management consulting and recruiters, alike are in this world, so to speak. So 10 years, supply chain, logistics, executive search. We work with companies that simplistically manufacture goods. So some of the largest manufacturing companies in the world, whether it's food, whether it's industrial, electronic companies, as well as logistics, service providers, e-commerce companies. And then perhaps to the topic of emerging economy. So we've done searches, including in so Maersk is the client that's expanded a lot in LATAM. We've helped them through our office there, not myself directly, but through our office. But then I've seen huge growth, and I was part of several searches whether it was Africa, Southeast Asia is a big market for us. It's grown tremendously. Agus, you probably know there's been some. China and Southeast Asia, I think, from an e-commerce perspective, they've done phenomenally well. Also India, and yeah, excited to be here and share more with you today.
Great to have you in the show, Radu, and both of you, Agus. And I think that we can dive deeper into one of the first themes of the day. When you look at many moving goods from A to B, and especially no matter where are you in the world, it's extremely complex at the end of the day, and multiple stakeholders are involved, and a lot of things can go wrong and will go wrong of getting our precious goods into our homes and into our business doors. What would you say that is happening in the game, Agus, in Latin America? Mercado Libre, for those who do not know, is the largest company by market cap in Latin America currently. And it's basically like Amazon for Latin America. And Amazon is not dominating Latin America. And I think that is also a fascinating point to mention. And Mercado Libre, you're making sure that all the goods are getting into people's doors. What is happening? What are the challenges that you're facing, especially in Latin America and in emerging economy, where, to be frank, a lot of the things have not existed in multiple different countries in terms of infrastructure, in terms of technologies, in terms of people's know-how. How are you making it? How are you getting those goods?
Maybe first one step before even jumping into e-commerce, I think that the landscape in Latin America and what actually moved Mercado Libre to say, hey, we need to develop our own logistics network. I have to say, Mercado Libre, before I joined, they were a bit hesitant or even resistant to start touching the packages like someone here said. But one of the things that forced us into moving in that direction was that the postal services in Latin America were not really well developed. They were so we started with a very low bar, I would say. I mean, Correios do Brasil in Brazil and several private players in Argentina, they were slow, relatively unreliable, and expensive, I would say, particularly in Brazil. I think Mexico was slightly different. Mexico had private players that were a bit more developed and the parcel business was a bit more developed, but that was really what forced us into moving in that direction. If you always have the customer and the buyer in mind and you want to give an outstanding experience to them, you have to be reliable, you have to be fast. One of the things that we've learned and that has driven in several ways the evolution of the different types that we use to deliver packages has been speed. Speed. I've never seen correlations like in academia, even like I've seen in Mercado Libre between the the s- the speed promise delivery and the conversion rate on the product page, let's say. So it, it and we can see that week by week. If 1 week we have some problems or we have something related to weather that we have to promise 1 day less, it's amazing how the conversion rates just drop. And that also shows that we are winning against uh, uh, commerce offline as well, because we are the fastest there. So really, if you are used to get something next day and you're going to get it 2 days, 3 days, then probably you're going to go to the store, up down and just buy it there. So speed is of the essence, reliability is of the essence,
Hmm.
and so that moved us to have our own network. Um,
Just a question here. Are these the key metrics that you're using or in the indicators to say, okay, we have a successful supply chain? Are they speed, as you were saying, or do you have any other uh,
yeah,
important
it's
factors?
a good point, and some of those things are actually changing right now, and I'll tell you in a second why. Um, but the traditional, the three main metrics that we would use to, there are several that we use, and this is particularly Mercado Envios is like a business unit that is full of engineers. So, so you can
Yeah.
imagine, you can imagine that we love KPIs and we have several. But I would say that the three main ones are delay, and that's the big driver of experience. We don't want to be late. If we promise something, we don't want to be late. Speed and cost. Those are the three main ones that we take a look at all the time. Why is it that we are now? I would say shifting from speed, but we are looking at other metrics as well, which is promise. Um, the reason for that is that up until I would say a year ago, typically we would offer our top speed and the customer would always pick that. We are starting to test and trial slow shipping methods that are cheaper, particularly for the items where we don't have free shipping. It's a small subset, but still we are trialing, and yesterday was actually the shareholders um, presentation, and there were some comments on this. We are deploying what is called the Mercado Libre delivery day, which is you pick a day and you get all your packages together that same day. So for those two delivery methods, for instance, what we see is that speed actually goes down. But is it that we are getting worse with our network? Not really. We could deliver those very fast if you're not picking that type of delivery method. So what we're trying to measure now as well, on top of the three that I mentioned before, is promise, which is what is the fastest promise that I can deliver on the product page. Then the buyer might select something different, and that's fine. But we want to see how good we can promise, and then how fast we are. But how fast we are used to be a function just that would relate to what we did. Now it relates to what we do and what the buyer chooses. So it's that's why we're starting to see that metric as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. But then if we can now focus on the challenges of delivering on those KPIs when the consumers obviously care about that you're making your promises come true, you're delivering on time, and mostly and hopefully even before the promised time. What are you both seeing, Agus and Radu? If we have to, let's say, compare into the global north, the more developed countries, what are you seeing that are now the main challenges of making sure that this promise can be kept?
I'll just quickly share because I think you have a lot more experience with this, Agus. But I can mostly speak Europe and then Southeast Asia, China related. I think there's two sides to these coins, to these promises. So one, we as consumers perhaps have gotten used to too much for zero money, right? So I think there's a trend of companies starting to charge for returns, starting to charge for expedited logistics services, which is normal because for a long time, specifically in Southeast Asia, there were huge amounts of money being spent by Lazada is a player and that was bought by Alibaba. There's another player, for example, Shopee. They were basically paying for all of that. Consumers were not. That's not sustainable. That's not a business model. And I'll be curious to hear also from Agus how it works in South America. That's one angle to it, which is very bottom line driven, right? So ultimately, if it costs the marketplace money to deliver that parcel, at some point it eats into the bottom line and it's not profitable. The second aspect that is increasing nowadays is a sustainability aspect, where we clearly know, and a lot of countries, I mean, again, there's differences, right? I think the more developed countries, the European countries, the North American countries, they're a lot more advanced, let's say, in implementing legislation, even in tracking this, even. It's coming to, I think, all over the world in that sense, but it's not sustainable that, I order something and then I get it the next day. Not necessarily, right? And nor is it necessarily useful, right? So I think KPIs are important. Obviously, there's the expectations of the customers of speed, fast, and so on. But I'm happy to hear such ideas that Agus, I haven't seen this model implemented in Southeast Asia yet, where you can basically bulk all your different deliveries in one day and say, look, just deliver whatever I ordered over the course of the week, deliver it on Sunday, and I'm good. I think we need more of that. So I guess what I'm saying is that one, there's what I have seen as patterns is that companies start to charge more and more. It's not that you get delivery free, you get returns free, you get everything free as a consumer. I think that is, at least in the parts of the world that I'm most familiar with, is slowly but surely doing away with. And I think companies are more and more experimenting with how can we almost educate the customer that, look, you don't need it tomorrow. Certain things you may be okay to wait. And then, we give you a discount, or we give you a batch order, or we give you whatever. The key then is that you obviously need to deliver on that promise, because if you say that you're going to deliver on Sundays, but you don't do it, then of course you can forget about the client return. So these are some initial thoughts.
Yeah, I think that Radu alludes to one big thing, which is cost, and that is why we've been trialing a bit more the slow deliveries and the consolidated just one day a week delivery, just to make sure that we're able
Sir,
to.
can you mention a little bit to the audience what do you mean by slow delivery? I think that's not clear for everybody.
Yeah. So typically, let's say that you live in Sao Paulo or close region, and you want to, let's do this. Let's say that you live in Rio de Janeiro, right? And so most of the goods that you're going to buy are still going to come from Sao Paulo. So if you go into the Mercado Libre site today, you buy an item, you're probably going to get it next day, right? It's unless there's big, weather issue or whatever, you get it next day. What that means is that we have line hauls coming out at a specific time out of our facilities in Sao Paulo every day, right? So that means, some days, typically Mondays is a high demand because some purchases accumulate during the weekend, and so Mondays that line haul might be full at 80%, but then Friday, Thursday might be full at 50%, 60%, whatever. So uh, if you're able to say, hey, I'll give you a slower delivery, so you won't get it next day, you get it in between 3 days and 5 days, and you might be willing, if that the delivery is getting paid for, which is typically for cheaper items, right? If that delivery is getting paid for, you might want to do it, receive a slower delivery for lower cost. But then what I'm able to do is say, when I'm going to send that item in that line haul, so I can rebalance a bit the load of the line hauls, and so make it efficient. So it's not that I'm making it cheaper for you because you're going to buy more. That is part of the reasoning. But the other one is that I'm able to balance a bit more my network. And because if you're always working at the fastest pace possible, you're going to have some inefficiencies by design. Because again, if you want to always be able to deliver next day in Rio de Janeiro, you need to have a line haul that leaves no later than 11 p.m. from Sao Paulo to be able to make it next day to Rio, and that's just how it is. But then that means that it leaves, if it's 40% full, if it's 60% full, if it's 80% full. So what we're trying to
Yep.
do is rebalance that with slow deliveries. With delivery day is a bit similar, although the benefit comes much more from the last mile. If you're able, let's say that you buy on average 3 packages per week, right? On your on eCommerce, and you receive one on Monday, one on Wednesday, one on Friday. Whatever. If you consolidate, what happens is that last mile vehicle will deliver 3 packages on your doorstep on one day. And the cost of last mile are much more proportional to the number of stops than to the number of packages that it carries, right? So if you're able to consolidate a bit more, in fewer stops, more packages per stop, you're able to make denser, more dense last mile routes and reduce the cost of last mile. So that's a bit the thinking and the rationale behind, the Mercado Libre delivery day. And again, what happens every time is we do a benefit like this and we transfer that to the buyers. And so right now, we launched MELI Plus, which is a new loyalty program. And now in Brazil, we used to have free shipping starting at 79 reais. That is about $15, more or less. And now with MELI Plus, if you are part of the loyalty program, you're able to get it in your MELI delivery day. So in a select day of delivery, you're able to get free shipping from 29 reais. So starting from $5. So all the items with 15, you get them for free if you are consolidating those into a specific delivery day.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Radu, on but basically what you mentioned in the part of the world that you're seeing, let's say more towards east part of the world, especially Southeast Asia. What are you seeing that is being trying to be implemented in terms of technologies, solutions to be able to make the shipping more sustainable and getting the goods to the end destination in a more sustainable manner that A is greater for the environment and B is actually just more cost efficient. Are you seeing anything new being done? Is something interesting to share in terms of technology processes that have been implemented and what is going on over there?
Um, Well, maybe just to take a step back, I guess I could point you in the direction of the people that know the technologies, because I mean our job is headhunting, so I would probably know the guys that or the guys and the girls that have done it, but I would probably
True.
be less a specialist to talk on the specifics of it. What I'm seeing, and I mean I think this is not necessarily specific to Southeast Asia or to Asia in general. I think there's a big push, and I'm quite impressed again how fast they've managed to move, especially in China. There's a big push in electrifying all the fleets and all the vehicles. I mean, it's not the overall solution to all the sustainability issues, but it's one. So I mean, if you go now into China, uh, there's very little noise, right? So you're used to when you go into a city. I am used to. I don't know. Maybe you guys are used to. There's a lot of noise, honks, and there's the noise of engines roaring and so on. Now it's getting to a point where in China it's very quiet, right? Because it's a lot of the stuff have been done on electric cars. All the deliveries are on the electric trucks. So I think they're going in the right direction. I'm also quite impressed with Vietnam. Vietnam, you may know, they actually have, and they've kind of built it from scratch.
Yeah.
There's a car manufacturer called VinFast. They're pushing hard on electric as well. There's things like that. I'm friends, and we've worked also with the postal services. I would say that the postal services in some of the countries are good. So like CEO of Post Malaysia is a good friend, and he's done also a lot of units in terms of electric vehicles for their fleets. Singapore Post is good. There's some other countries, maybe I won't name them, where it's less good, but I think that's one low hanging fruit that a lot of people are implementing on the electric. What I haven't seen, and I'm actually quite curious to see to see Agus's perspective, because you have different marketplaces. So in Southeast Asia, there's two of them that are fighting quite closely: Lazada, Shopee. You have I don't know, in US you have Amazon and Walmart. I mean, it's not, I'm oversimplifying, but there tends to be some very large ones, right? I don't know exactly in South America. I think Mercado Libre is definitely leading the pack. But there's a lot of different smaller ones, right, as well. And I'm just wondering, and I haven't quite seen this, or I haven't seen it at scale. Why can't there be a consolidator in the last mile, right? Why can't there be somebody that, delivers maybe the parcel of Mercado Libre and the parcel of whoever else, right? They just aggregate all of that, and you can use one, because that would save a lot of space and that would create a lot of density. I mean, it's a headache, and it's a logistics nightmare on whose parcel gets delivered first and who gets picked up at what time. But I think that's an idea, or that's a concept that I haven't seen implemented. It's somewhat possible, at least in my mind, hypothetically, and I might be oversimplifying. But I would be curious, Agus, if you've ever explored, you're owning your last miles, right? And you're going and you're developing that logistics owned by Mercado Libre. But in terms of almost batching with other providers and other last miles, whether it's from retail, whether it's from e-commerce, whether it's from whatever. I don't know if you've ever explored that, and would that be a viable model sometime down the line? Because it sounds to me like a sustainable one for sure.
So let me first address that one, and then I'll comment on three things that I think we're doing for the sustainability piece. On that one, I think on the one hand side, the reason why we haven't thought about consolidating or with other places, as you mentioned, Mercado Libre is quite dominant, but we do have some markets where there are other players as well, and you say, hey, let's consolidate and let's do the last mile together. One of the things is that we control the experience end to end. We want to be able to tell you, it's arriving in the next hour. Even the whole app that we developed for the drivers, I think it would be very hard to integrate that with other packages that are from different players. But I think most importantly, one of the reasons and one of the key differentiating and strategic advantages that Mercado Libre has developed is its own delivery network. And right now we are the fastest. So we do benchmarks against Amazon, against Falabella, against all the local players in Brazil, Via Varejo, Americanas, against Walmart in Mexico. And right now we are the fastest delivery network in Latin America, and we know that that is a key differentiating attribute of Mercado Libre. We want to keep it that way. That is also why what we have thought about, but we still haven't started doing that, is to what extent we do what we call off packages, which is doing delivery for packages that are not from Mercado Libre or sold in Mercado Libre. And we're starting to think about how we would do that, to what extent. But again, deliveries and the speed of the network that we have is part of our advantage, and we don't want to keep that. Going back to the sustainability piece, 3 things that we see. One is electric vehicles for sure. Right now we have I think it's 1,800 electric vehicles in all of Latin America. We're quickly heading towards being the largest electric vehicle fleet in Latin America for sure. And that is part of the story. I would say there are 2 other things that come. One that is particular to Latin America. The first one is also particular to Latin America, which is how you think about inventory allocation, particularly for several. So right now, one of the delivery methods that we have is through our fulfillment centers. In our fulfillment centers, we already have the inventory. We receive it from the sellers, we store it, and then we ship it once it gets sold. And there's a clear balance that you have to make between cost, delivery speed, and sustainability, which is where exactly do you put that piece of that item, right? You might want to take it closer to where demand might be, but then if demand is not there and ends up, being, let's say we receive things from buyers in Sao Paulo, but we have fulfillment centers in Bahia. To what extent do we send items to Bahia? Which items do we? Because if then we run out of those items in Sao Paulo, and then the buyer ends up buying Sao Paulo, I have to so that's not very sustainable from a CO2 emissions point of view, but also from a cost perspective. So we're trying to solve that problem, which is very, very hard to solve, particularly because not every item from different sellers is the same. You might have the same water bottle, but if it's sold from one customer, from one seller, sorry, or from a different seller, the same water bottle, then for us it's 2 different items, right? And so that is a problem that is hard to solve. We have several PhDs, guys from operational optimization that are working on solving that problem, both from the sustainability side, from the cost side, but also from the experience side. If you're able to really have the inventory closer to the buyer, then your delivery is faster. And the final one, which is a method that we have exploited in Latin America quite a lot, because of the nature of Latin America. If you think, for instance, Buenos Aires, let's think Argentina, right? We deliver to the whole country, but several sellers and several buyers are concentrated in Buenos Aires. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to, run the crosstalk and receive all the packages from all the sellers and then redistribute to the buyers, which are located in some cases, right next to the seller, right? And so there, what we have implemented, and it's very, very predominant in capital cities like Buenos Aires, like Sao Paulo, like Santiago de Chile, is what we call a flex, which is we give the technology to the seller, but the seller does the delivery. And we do that for a very close range of where the buyers might be. And then the rest, we do it through our cross-dock network, we do it through our fulfillment network. But that is also quite helpful from a sustainability perspective. If you're close to the seller, the seller might do the delivery themselves, and they might, hire a motorbike to do that, or they in some cases for small sellers they might do it themselves. But that is something that we have been able to do in Latin America much more because of the denser, more concentrated populations. If you think about the US, it's more spread out, and you might buy something in the US and the seller might be, from the other side of the country. That tends to happen a bit more in Brazil, but for instance, in Argentina, Chile are super concentrated in their capital cities.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I was here. You're talking a lot about different problematics, and you are quite at the frontier, I would say, in most issues. So you are the one that sees the challenges first for your size. And do you always try to look for solutions in-house? Well, Mercado Libre is a mammoth. It's huge. So you could also buy companies. How are you trying to solve these problems, right?
So I'd say we try to strike. Let me go back first. From a technology perspective, we always solve it in-house. We never, so we have convinced ourselves that our technology and the developers that we have are also a key differentiating factor and a key strategic advantage that Mercado Libre has. So from a technology perspective, and from the value of having, let's say, an interrelated and connected experience for the buyer with the whole technology stack, we have to do all the solutions. Like when Mercado Envios first started, we would have the warehouse management systems. We said, hey, warehouse management systems, we are an e-commerce company. We don't know how to do this. There are several companies that do this, very effectively. Let's just, use a third-party provider for the WMS. And it was very hard to integrate. We didn't control the experience. There were several features that we wanted the WMS to have that it didn't. So we kicked that away. We developed our own WMS, and so that I think is one experience where we saw, technology. We have to do it.
Are you finding the people to do this within Latin America? Are you finding the talent? This Radu is going very deeply into your category as well. Is like searching for the talent to execute on this. And Agus, you also mentioned that you're looking for PhD students to solve a lot of your problems. You're trying to bring people in who can solve these things. And just like overall, Agus, are you finding these people? And Radu, what are you seeing as well, like on the headhunting scene, that you're just sourcing the whole market? Is the talent there to solve these type of problems?
Yeah.
Is there enough supply?
I think, and Radu can probably
Yeah.
complement me, but I think that one thing is Mercado Libre right now is first, it has a culture that attracts people really well, but it also has a size that we look for the best in every part of the world. Like right now, for instance, my senior VP that runs all of our fulfillment operations, his name is Joe Nordman. He's from the US, but before that, he used to run all of the fulfillment operations in Kupang in South Korea. And so we're not just sourcing, not just fishing in our bowl of Latin American talent. We're at the point where we're able to get the best talent from everywhere in the world. And I think that it's the same case with developers. We have a very much trying to work remotely, and that facilitates having the talent where they want to be. I think I'm probably the best example of that. Not because I'm a talent, but because I work mostly remotely. I live in Chile, which is probably our fourth largest market. One would think, head of shipping, you should be working either in Mexico or Brazil, but I just wanted to stay here, and I think we're able to manage that. My direct reports, I have one that lives in Mexico, one lives in the US. One lives in Brazil. I have two that live in Argentina, and one that lives here in Chile. We're not organized by countries.
Yeah.
Organized by functions below me. So it's not like I have those spread out because they each run a geography. It's not like that. So I think that in terms of talent, we're able to source really, really well and attract developers is always a challenge because developers can also work remotely for the US and for other countries, and that is the toughest competition, I would say. But the joy and the cultural connection that you get from working in Mercado Libre, if you live in Latin America, that's something that we offer that is pretty unique.
Absolutely. And then Radu, on what do you see over there? You are covering a global search for multi different type of roles, no matter what is the specific focus of the company of trying to help anything get from A to B. You're involved everywhere within the process. What is the supply of supply chain logistics talent overall in the world at the moment? Is there enough? What's going on?
So maybe I'll zero in on Latin America and specifically Mexico has been an incredibly hot country. There's a big. So I'll zoom out a little bit. So e-commerce is one thing. If we look even more big picture at the manufacturing footprints, right? So where are goods manufactured? There's been so much discussions. Geopolitics is very high on the discussion risk and discussion list, and as a risk for most companies. In order to de-risk that, China and US as two main players, but there's now smaller players, there's regional players, right? You have India, you have the war in Ukraine and Russia, you have a lot of different things. So the trend has been that, is going to continue to be that supply chains are going to get more and more regionalized. So specifically, to talk layman terms, simplistically, there's been a lot of production of goods that was moved and is going to continue to be moved in Mexico primarily because it's proximity to US. I think Brazil, there's a couple of other countries in Latin America that will benefit, but Mexico in specific, they've done tremendously well. Now, that has come with a boom of manufacturing facilities, fulfillment centers, you name it, especially in northern Mexico, yeah. And you don't have talent, who's going to operate them? So when you put a factory that makes, you start making electronics, I mean, of course, there's different products, right? Some products are more simple to make or more easy to make. Some products are not. The more parts they have, right? So if you go into electronics, automotive, white goods, right? The more complex the supply chains, the longer the supply chains, the more parts that you get. In a car, you have 30,000 parts, right? One of my friends actually works for Airbus. In a plane, you have 3 million parts. But anyways, not to talk planes yet. So Mexico, all of a sudden, is now in a situation where there's a boom of factories, of distribution centers, and there's just not enough talent, especially not local talent. That is able to take all those jobs. And especially when you talk about doing parts for a car or doing parts of a laptop or these are fairly specialized skills. So we've been involved with several companies, including Tesla is opening a very large distribution center. We don't work with them for Mexico, but we've had to look for talent, whether it's been in other parts of Latin America, whether it's been in US, whether it's been increasingly also in Asia, to put it in these markets where there's new supply chains and manufacturing facilities being developed, i.e. Mexico, US as well. It's been all over the news. They've done there's still a lot of incentives to bring manufacturing to US. Again, it doesn't make sense for most things, but for chips, semiconductors, we all know the geopolitics of semiconductors, that literally these chips that go into every single device, every single electronic. It's the way that the US has decided that they want to kind of keep China at bay. They've put some huge fabs in Arizona in particular and in Texas. There's no such people that can manage those facilities anymore in US. US has outsourced manufacturing long time back. So we actually were in a position where we worked with a couple of
Yeah.
semiconductor companies, and we placed some were American citizens that were working in Asia for a long time that went back. Some were others, right? I mean, maybe people from that were running different factories or different supply chains in Asia that went to Mexico or went to US to do this specialized skills. Now, Agus mentioned that, the head of fulfillment. Yeah, Coupang. Coupang is an amazing story, Korean. I think increasingly e-commerce giant, increasingly for the e-commerce side, the talent is highly mobile. I think they join, and it's such a, in many ways, I'm thrilled by e-commerce because it has pushed the boundaries of what is possible, right? I mean, in terms of speed, at the lower cost, in terms of convenience, I think a lot of the innovation that has happened in the world in the last 5 to 10 years has been coming from that world of e-commerce. At the same time, I think the trick, and Agus can confirm or disinform this, the trick is how do you keep them? Because there's such a fight for people that come from the e-commerce world. Also big companies like the Unilevers, the Zaras of the world, the H&Ms of the world, you name it, right? The Apples of the world, they want this skill set of ability to go to market fast, to create these distribution networks fast, to create this customer experience, that great customer experience for their consumers fast. So it ends up being, yes, there's some great talent in these e-commerce companies, and everybody wants them, whether they're e-commerce or whether there are other companies out there, whether they're brands, whether they're retailers, whether they're whatever, whether it's this Google of the world, right, and Microsoft of the world. So I think the key is how do you keep them? How do you make it attractive? One element for sure, and I heard it from the sharing before, keep it flexible in terms of location, in terms of challenges, in terms of all of that. But I would say is no longer enough. So that level of making sure that your employees are consistently stretched, not overstretched to the point that they get exhausted as well. Fair compensation, of course, financials, and having that vision, mission of what is the company trying to achieve. I think Mercadolibre, by being a leader and continuing to push the envelope of what is possible in South America, would get that element of standings for something that would attract a lot of candidates. But I would say if you're a second, third, fourth player, or even down the food chain, it's a lot harder to attract the right talent. I mean, right now we're working with so you have the direct to consumer model, right? So Shein, you probably know that's the huge Chinese, they basically link the factory directly to us as consumers. You can buy online. They've mastered the art of TikTok marketing and so on. So we're working with a company that's kind of like the Shein model, but it's more on high-end goods. I can tell you it's not necessarily easy to attract the people to that particular company, right? Because it's not so huge. It doesn't have the same brand. And also now we are in a lot of the world, in a lot of the parts of the world, we are in a downturnish type of environment. So Europe for sure, US not yet, but I think it's going to hit. China is in a little bit of a downslide as well. So I think candidates are a lot more, and talent is a lot more careful about how safe is it, how future-proof is it, and who am I joining, and is there longevity in this job?
Absolutely. And from there, if we go into the final theme of the day very, very quickly before we have to go into other set of things for the day, would be sustainability. We covered that very briefly earlier. You both mentioned that, Radu and Agus. Just to put a little context into this, for me, it has been very fascinating to realize, especially traveling all around Latin America, is that sustainability as a topic by itself is not really existent compared to what it is in Europe or in the US. In all frankness, I feel that it's not being talked about at all. It's not visible. It's not there. There's such a humongous set of different problems that has to be solved on an immediate basis. So then basically the question comes into you, Radu and Agus. What are you seeing in emerging markets? Let's say Asia, there are certain cases that, Radu, you mentioned. In China, the streets are quiet. Everything's running electric. Vietnam is a great promising country, what has been able to really put an effort on moving towards sustainability. In Latin America, Costa Rica is one of the most advanced, at least they're branding themselves as one of the most eco-friendly country in the whole continent and on the whole region. But for both of you, if we focus now on Latin America, sustainability as a topic, I don't see it. Nobody talks about it really. Is not on people's minds. So, what is going on? Will it go there? Do people care?
So I think, part of the problem is this is the type of situation where it's good to have, an ecosystem of players that actually, develop, request and have the use for the resources that are required to do the transition to more sustainable shipping, for instance. And I think that I think it's a great example of why Mercado Libre is making a difference in Latin America. So I mentioned briefly before that we're pretty much in line to turn ourselves into the largest electric vehicle fleet in Latin America. We've issued a sustainable bond. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. It's $400 million that is destined to do CO2 emissions reduction, and we do that same thing with our facilities. Why is it that we are not moving faster? And when we go down and drill down on why we're not doing that faster, it's because the ecosystem is not yet there. So we're in several ways we're like the tip of the arrow trying to make this change for Latin America. For instance, electric vehicles. One of the key things that you need to develop a good network of delivery with electric vehicles is you need the chargers, you need the charging stations, and you need to have a relatively good network of charging stations. We can have those at our service centers, at our last mile centers, but sometimes you need, charging points in the middle. And so right now, for instance, we realize that why is it that we can't go faster? Because there's not the infrastructure for the charging station. So we're partnering with companies, with suppliers to start to develop that. And I think, again, once you have that, then it's easier for other players to move into, electric vehicles, because now you have the infrastructure for charging stations. The other thing where we're not moving fast enough, for the reason we're not moving fast enough, is we don't yet really have good suppliers, good reliable suppliers for the amount of vehicles that we require to move into our electric vehicle fleet. And one of the interesting things that we're doing there is we're partnering with a Brazilian company called Arrow, that they are developing, large, what do we call it, Fuchs, which is it's kind of a mid-size urban vehicle to go last mile, but can carry up to 300 packages per route. And when partnering with them, and they are building this very dedicated type of vehicles, electric vehicles, and we're partnering with them to start helping develop those. But they are a startup, and so we're supporting them in doing the ramp up. And when we go to typical automotive companies and we say, hey, we need 500 vehicles, it's like, no, I can't deliver
They
those.
can't deliver that. Yeah.
Give me 5 years, and at the same time we also can have 5 vehicles of this brand, 5 vehicles of that brand, because then doing maintenance and to work the chargers and everything, it's going to be a nightmare. So it's like I think that Mercado Libre and Envíos in particular is doing a terrific job in being the tip of the arrow, but it requires that to start having the ecosystem. And then I think that for the followers, it will be easier. And so that's why I think that the job that we are doing in that specific side of shipping is critical.
Absolutely. And Radu, what are you seeing? Are you seeing that your clients are requesting people to understand this, understanding what needs to be done in order to be a sustainable organization? What are you seeing this happening in Latin America? And just to get your thoughts on that.
So I just briefly, I think it's linked to the level of development. So if it's the Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? So the more developed a nation, see Europe, see US, then the more that they're going to care about sustainability. When you're struggling to put food on the table, or when you're literally maybe affording just to buy a packet of detergent because you don't have money to buy a kilogram of detergent, you're not going to talk sustainability. So I think as from a consumer market, it's not just Latin America, Southeast Asia as well, Africa. I mean, I don't think people in the street are necessarily concerned about sustainability. They're concerned about, do I have food on my table, right? I mean, it's much more basic. But from a company perspective, I think where we can do a lot more, and companies can do a lot more, is to collaborate. Sustainability should not be used as a weapon of whilst there's all sorts of things that we should compete on, fair enough. I don't think we should compete on sustainability. So I think the key word here is collaboration. How can we collaborate? And I just mentioned some projects, right? How can we collaborate to build a network of charging stations? How we can collaborate on sustainable packaging solutions, right? So that we don't pollute with plastic the whole world. I mean, that can be done and should be done, and should be initiatives at overall industry level. And I think that should be done much more aggressively, and much more, let's say, vocally by companies in leading that initiatives, and not waiting for governments, especially in emerging markets, but doing it themselves, because ultimately it's going to catch up. And ultimately, with the international regulations coming in, it's just a matter of time before even companies in South America, Latin America will be measured by some EU regulators or US regulators on what are you exactly doing, and you're going to get penalized if you don't do it. So it's a clear path that we all need to play a role in this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for giving a couple of your thoughts and sharing that into the world. Agus, Radu, thanks so much for participating today. I think that we're going to be able to make a good show out of this and share the latest findings from Agus and Radu to the world. Thanks a lot for participating.
My pleasure.
Sure.
Good to connect already.